A research problem is a systems-level pattern in which a real-world phenomenon contains a persistent tension that produces long-term consequences if it continues unexamined. At this stage, the goal is no longer to describe what you want to study or who it helps locally. The goal is to identify an issue that operates beyond individual experience and repeats across settings over time. This is the shift from interest to issue, and it is what separates a research problem from a topic, a gap, or a practice concern. A research problem is not a topic. A topic names an area of focus. A research problem names something that is misaligned, underperforming, or unclear within that area. It is also not just a gap in the literature. Saying there is limited research explains what is missing, but it does not explain why that absence matters. A research problem always includes stakes, and those stakes must extend beyond a single person, classroom, or organization. One clear way to define a research problem is to think in terms of three connected elements: the phenomenon, the tension, and the consequence. All three must be present. When one is missing, what you usually have is a near miss rather than a fully formed research problem. The phenomenon is what is happening. It is the observable condition or pattern that exists in the world. It should be described as neutrally as possible. In our example, the phenomenon is that AI tools now exist that can provide adaptive, individualized support for communication, executive functioning, organization, and task initiation for learners with disabilities such as autism and dyslexia. This is simply a statement of what is present and possible. The tension is where the problem actually emerges. This is what is misaligned or underperforming within the phenomenon. Here, the tension is that current accommodation systems primarily rely on supports such as note-takers, extended time, or breaking assignments into smaller parts. These accommodations are designed to remove barriers, not to fade as competence develops. Accommodation reduces immediate friction, while scaffolding is intended to support learners in gradually doing more on their own. Many existing supports require ongoing human mediation, do not adapt over time, and do not intentionally scaffold toward independence. This creates a disconnect between what current systems provide and what newer tools are capable of supporting. The consequence is what happens if this tension continues unaddressed. When learners with autism and dyslexia move through systems that prioritize accommodation without scaffolding toward independence, the effects extend far beyond academic tasks. Over time, these patterns can contribute to increased anxiety that persists into adulthood, as individuals internalize reliance on others to manage communication, organization, or task completion. When this approach is normalized across educational systems, it can lead to greater dependence rather than greater autonomy, not because of individual limitations, but because of how support systems are designed. Repeated across settings and years, these outcomes become systemic, shaping long-term independence and quality of life. It is equally important to be clear about what a research problem is not, because many ideas land close to the mark without reaching this level. A research problem is not an individual issue. Statements like, "Students with autism experience anxiety," may be accurate, but individual difficulty alone does not constitute a research problem. Research problems emerge when systems consistently produce the same outcomes across people and contexts. A research problem is also not a coping problem. Saying that learners need better strategies to manage anxiety places responsibility on individuals rather than examining the structures shaping those outcomes. That is a practice concern, not a research problem. Another common near miss is framing the issue as a local implementation challenge. Statements such as "our school needs better accommodations," or "teachers need more training" may be valid, but if the concern only exists within one setting, it belongs to program improvement or evaluation, not research intended to inform a field. A research problem is also not simply the existence of a solution. Saying that AI could help learners with disabilities is a claim, not a problem. The problem is the misalignment between what systems currently do and what is possible, and the consequences of that misalignment over time. In this case, the problem is not that learners with autism or dyslexia need support. It is not that anxiety exists. The problem is that support systems consistently rely on accommodations that do not scaffold toward independence, even when tools exist that could. When those design choices are repeated and normalized across systems, they shape long-term outcomes related to autonomy, anxiety, and reliance on others. This framing matters because it anchors everything that follows. A clearly articulated research problem determines the purpose, sharpens the research questions, and guides the literature review toward explaining the tension rather than describing the topic. Without a research problem grounded in phenomenon, tension, and consequence at the systems level, the rest of the study has nothing stable to build on.